There are legends folks just don't talk about anymore. Names that used to be whispered, feared, respected, then forgotten. But shadows? They don't disappear so easily. They linger, waiting for the right moment to come back. And one of those shadows was Kael. A warrior, sure. Maybe a hero? But deep down, just a man searching for redemption. Kael wasn't your everyday hero. He didn't care about fame, fortune, or pats on the back. What drove him was something way darker, something deeper. He needed to break free from the curse that had stuck with him since the day he was born. This ain't some tale of glory or quick wins. No, this is a story about struggle, a fight against fate, the shadows lurking inside, and the heavy hand of a tyrant, long dead, still holding him down. Kael grew up in a small village tucked away between snow-covered mountains, where the air was thin and the mornings could chill you to the bone. He always felt different apart from the others. While the kids laughed and played in the snow, Kael would stand back, just watching, his eyes full of questions nobody else could see. His old man, Untold, was cold as the snow under their feet, his words sharper than a winter wind. The villagers kept their distance from him, and Kael never knew why. As Kael got older, the weight of their family secret started sinking in. His father didn't say much, but when he did, it was always laced with anger, like a storm just waiting to break. "You'll end up just like me," Untold warned one day. "You can't outrun what's in your blood." Those words stuck with Kael, a thorn digging deeper into his mind every day. At 18, Kael had had enough. He couldn't stand the weight of his father's shadow any longer. He packed up what little he had and left that village, setting out across the roughest lands he could find. He wandered through scorching deserts, where the sun beat down without mercy, and trudged through dense forests, where the thick canopy blocked out the sky. Every step felt like he was trying to outrun not just his past, but something darker, the curse hanging over him like a storm about to break. At night, Kael was haunted by dreams, always the same. His father would appear, surrounded by flames, eyes burning with a hatred that cut deep. "You can't escape who you are," the voice would echo, pulling Kael deeper into despair. Those nightmares left Kael shaken, unsure if he could ever truly be free from his father's grip. One evening, after weeks on the road, Kael arrived in a mountain village. It was here he met Drystan, an old warrior who had long since hung up his sword, searching for peace in the quiet. Drystan took one look at Kael and saw it, the weight of a man carrying more than just the scars of battle. Drystan was no stranger to pain. With his weathered face, graying hair, and a scar running from his brow to his chin, Drystan's body told stories of wars he had fought and won. But the wars that mattered most, the ones that had taken the biggest toll, were the ones inside him. He had spent years trying to escape the man he once was, seeking refuge in these quiet mountains. In Kael, he saw a reflection of himself, a man torn between the man he wanted to be and the one he feared becoming. The two formed a bond, an unspoken understanding between men who had seen too much. One cold night, sitting by a crackling fire after a skirmish with bandits, Kael finally spoke. He told Drystan about the curse that had followed him since birth, about his father, Untold, who had ruled through fear. Untold wasn't just a tyrant, but a monster who had cursed his only son to follow in his footsteps. "You're my blood," Untold had said, sealing Kael's fate. "You'll never escape what I've left behind." Drystan listened in silence, the firelight flickering in his weathered eyes. He knew curses like this ran deep, but he also knew that even the darkest paths had a way out. So he vowed to help Kael, and together they set off on a grueling journey to the north, toward the mountains where legends spoke of an ancient sage who might hold the key to breaking the curse. The road was tough, the winds colder with each step, but what weighed heaviest on Kael wasn't the ice or snow, it was the growing darkness inside him. His dreams grew more vivid, more real, each night bringing him closer to the edge. In the deepest part of his mind, Kael could feel his father's voice growing louder. "You can't outrun me," Heron would sneer. "You are me." By the time they reached the sage's fortress, Kael wasn't sure if he could take much more. The old man, ancient as the mountains themselves, saw the turmoil in Kael's heart. "You want freedom, boy?" the sage said, his voice as steady as stone. "Then you need to face your father. Only by confronting the source of your torment can you break the chains." Kael and Drystan entered the spirit world, a twisted version of reality where the ground cracked under Kael's feet and the sky swirled with black clouds. Heron appeared, wreathed in flames, his eyes burning with rage. "You are my blood," he hissed. "You can't escape me." This wasn't just a battle of strength. Heron wanted to break Kael's spirit, to force him to accept the darkness and carry on his cruel legacy. But Kael wasn't the same man who had left his village. He remembered everything he had fought for, the lessons Drystan had taught him, and he realized that his father's legacy wasn't his own. Kael wasn't bound by blood. He had the power to choose who he would become. In that moment, Kael stood tall, rejecting the flames that licked at his feet. The darkness faded, and Altheron's fire began to sputter out. The curse broke not because Kael defeated his father, but because he refused to let his father's shadow define him. When Kael awoke, he was exhausted, but the weight that had clung to him for so long had finally lifted. He looked over at Drystan, who gave him a nod, knowing the battle Kael had fought wasn't just physical. Kael smiled for the first time in years, not a grin of victory, but of peace. He had faced his darkest fear and had come out the other side, free.